Hello, everybody. I played a game today against World Eaters, and it got me thinking. I World Eaters is an army I also play, and it a lot of my friends struggle and actually don't enjoy playing against me when I play World Eaters because they don't know how to deal with that melee pressure that I'm coming for you, that they know it's coming. When you would think that whether it's shooting or melee, the opponent is going to have a go turn, but melee just feels different. It can feel suffocating once it's on you. So what I thought I'd do is kind of show you how the deployment went, how the beginning of the game went, and how sometimes if you just, I've got a buddy that's from the UK, and we've been talking a lot of Warhammer stuff, and he has this saying he keeps saying of, bite the crayon. You just got to bite down on the crayons. And the world eaters are the crayon eaters of crayon eaters. And sometimes you just have to disrespect them and say, I can eat more than you can eat. And I'm going to show you this guy is a very good player, kind of how things went, and give you guys just a brief rundown. And I'll break it into a couple of different parts so none of the videos are crazy long. But I'm going to start with kind of deployment, scouting, and kind of pre-turn one for the beginning, just to explain a little bit of the methodology. I've had a lot of questions about like deploying Vahl and some different things, so I kind of wanted to go over that. So big surprise, both the immolators are splitting dominions. So I've got 5 here that are just kind of screening. I've got 5 here ready to scout to go to my expansion. Juna's just hanging out by herself, screening and CP farming. Sanctifiers are in the Rhino. I got 2 Retributors in reserve. These are the 2 girls that are in the cars. I've got 3 bricks of Sacrosancts that are all with Hospitala. And then I've got Morgan Vault. So the way I typically like to run my armies is I typically will say, I'm going to send 1 Sacrosanct at my opponent's expansion objective, and then I'm sending 2 of them in the middle. And what I have found is that when I see my opponent deploy the way he did, he had Karn and them in the Rhino. He had another brick ready to reload. He had 8 bound. He had Chaos Spawn. He had 2 Chaos Spawn that he was planning on just going over here. He had his Forge Fiends. Big surprise. He wants to bring a Forge Fiend here and just use the big lane here and shoot here. And he had a Demon Prince. Probably the goal was put the Demon Prince right here and then just send everything through. And I think his goal is these 8 bound, we're going to stand over here and just say, do you want to charge me with this Forge Fiend standing here with me? I think that was the general plan that he had, but he did have Gormongers here, which was a pain in the ass. I had no infiltrate. He did, which did annoy me a little bit because it did affect my scout. He dropped them last since I had no infiltrate. He got to know. So as soon as he saw this, he went, I don't really want him getting to scout up to here and stage to potentially, theoretically, you could drive 18 inches. You could get right to the edge of this. I could disembark, and then I could, have 50 points where the girl just blow up 140.8 bound, or his Forge Fiend for that matter. And so I think he was pretty smart with that, with this screen. I put Morgan here, just so you know. I normally would have probably put her right here, and with the goal of like just having her ready to move in as wave 2 or 3 into the middle. But when I saw these Gormongers, I thought that there's a very good chance he may want to come right here to try to jail me, to try to screen me. Morgan, as we know, with full rerolls, is sensational in Overwatch. I purposely put Morgan Vahl and her whole unit here because if I can see even one of those bad boys, I could Overwatch them. So the reason that they were deployed here was to counter if he wanted to push up with his Gormongers, because Gormongers aren't no joke. I mean, you're talking, this is going to be, there's 8 of them. It's a really weird number. So they'll get +1 on the charge. So you're talking 32 attacks with Lance on them. And they're going to have higher strength. The Lance is going to negate my girl's +1 to wound. So he's wounding on 3s, and he's probably going to have lethal and sustain because, World Eaters typically do. So like they could do some decent damage. They probably would kill a couple of sisters. So I didn't want that. So the reason she's there is purely for that Overwatch threat. So here's what happened. We rolled off. He got to go first. He was very excited about going first. He said his army is really built to set the tone and go, which I thought was a little surprising. I played a lot of World Eaters competitively, and I actually prefer going second on World Eaters. I need the opponent to move up in stage a little bit to close that gap. For a turn 2 or 3, really attack. But he was very confident. And so, it actually made me a little curious of what am I not thinking about? So he scouted his chaos spawn, I think about to here, give or take. He scouted his other ones like all the way out, basically almost to the point, which is as far as they could go. He did go ahead and scout his 8-bound and exalted 8-bound. I think they made it to like, I don't know, here-ish. And his other 8-bound didn't move. They just hung out right where they were. Then I could not scout because he was 9.4. So like going an inch wasn't going to do anything. So what I actually did was I pivoted and I went the 1 inch that I was allowed to. So he went there and that was all he did. Now, what did happen on the other side had a little bit more merit. I made a risk assessment. I know the Forgefiend has 36 inches, but it is only scary at 18 inches. So I measured and went, okay, if he's just as crazy and he comes straight forward to about here, where's 18 inches? And so I knew that like, as long as I stayed basically behind about this line, he wasn't going to be able to get his rerolls. So therefore, I wasn't really that scared of it. So I actually went ahead and said, okay, I'm going to move my car right here. And I had a very strategic reason and plan for this, which I'll get into here in just a second, because I do know that his 8-bound can go 10 inches and then they can charge. And so if they wanted to do that, I was totally fine with it. And then I basically reloaded because there was enough space. So the Rhino went right here. The Immolator went right here. And then my little girls here did go, I think I actually moved them their full 6 inches. So this was about how things settled. So turn 1, first thing he started doing was he was going to go here. Because you should always play by intent, I did tell him, hey, Morgan and the crew is going to just light you up. I got a miracle dice that I think it was like a 2. I was like, I'm going to pop that miracle dice so Fidelis gets more shots. And, I'm going to probably kill the whole squad. If I don't, I'll get close. So he started measuring because he went, okay. These guys moved 9 inches. What's the most I could get? And what he realized was the bottom one would have to be here, or he would have to do some weird thing where he kind of moved up here. And then he was going to have to like basically do like a kind of a crescent moon, which is basically what he ended up doing. And so it actually ended up working because the way the rules state is you have to be able to like start or end. So what was going to be spicy was I just could not be able to ever see him for it to work. And so we actually worked as a team together to make sure he could get the moves off correctly, because you should work with your opponent, make sure you can get it. But the thing I liked about this though was by forcing him to come up here and do this, what ended up happening, and you're going to see, is that he had to basically daisy chain his units, something to the extent of this. Instead of just being able to go straight forward and being like right here on a line, he had to do this, which then meant not as many are going to get in on the charge. So he staged here and he kind of thought about it and realized that like he was going to have a pretty long range if he was going to end up doing that. And he did the math in his head, and then he ended up retconning it, and I was totally fine with it. And he said, you know what? I don't actually want to do that. And so he put all of his units back where they were, basically. And after he put all of his units back where they were, he just said, okay, what's 18 inches? We measured it out. 18 inches was here. And he said, okay. So then he actually just moved these 2 Gormongers over, put them on the point so that they would hold the point, and just did that. Was totally fine with that. And then he scooted his chaos spawn back because they weren't needed. Oh no, he moved his chaos spawn over. That's what it was. So that he could take these points. He did move his Forgefiend up a little bit to support. And I think he was trying to get within that 18 inches so he could have that beautiful shot. These annihilators moved over here, the 8 bound with a slaughter bound. And what he was just doing is he's just staging. He's just staging, which is totally fine. Totally cool. Chaos Spawn moved up. Very typical World Eater turn. Hey, I'm going to put the pressure on you. What are you going to do about it, huh? Now, the play that I was waiting for, the play that I was just aching in my bones to know what he wanted to do was none of this. I knew all of this was going to happen. I expected all of this to happen. These guys were actually over here because Demon Prince was all the way out here in the front, because he was able to, he actually was able to get his Demon Prince not quite to the point, but right there in the footprint, but he had the lone up. I wanted to know what's going to happen with this Forge Fiend. That was the thing. I wanted to know what he wanted to do with the Forge Fiend, because I was hoping he was going to bring it out here to attempt to shoot me. And he did. He took the bait, hook, line, and sinker. So he moved it out its full 10 inches. And then he measured. He realized he wasn't going to get his rerolls. He was okay with that because he knew my emulator basically has 18 inches of range. And so he liked those odds. He was good with all of that. And he wanted to shoot. The reason I was wanting to pull it out was because once his Forge Fiends are gone, he has no shooting, and I have nothing to fear long range. He shot, surprise, surprise, he did 3 damage, or I'm sorry, he did 3 damage to my emulator, because, you know, it's D3 times 3, and then you're hitting on 4s with no rerolls, and then, you know, you're wounding on 4s. So it's an incredibly efficient thing into infantry and elite infantry, not into a toughness 10 emulator with a 3 base save, you know, so, and a 6 invuln. So he only sent me 1 wound. I failed it, took 3 damage. That was the end of the turn. Now, when this happens, I think most players may go, ooh, you know, because they're thinking, oh my gosh, there's so much pressure that's about to just crash into the middle, and it's so dangerous. What am I supposed to do? This is where you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable, and you have to meet pressure with pressure. When you do that, the opponent, a lot of the time, will have a difficult time responding because they will not be used to it. And this gentleman was not used to this at all. So this is what happened. Okay. So here's what ended up happening. As you can see, a lot of things have moved. I'm going to walk through it from the very top to the bottom very quickly. The scouts, my Dominions, moved up, stood on the point. At that point, I actually auto-seat them. The emulator swung up. The girls got out. And if you notice, I created an L around the car. The Rhino came out right next to him. I finished that L with all the flamers down here, but I finished that L around both the vehicles. So now the vehicles are completely insulated from that first charge. Now, something can absolutely pile into them, but the first wave isn't going to go into them. I moved my Sacrosancts up. This is very important. I moved them up. I need to get them in as soon as possible. I moved this emulator up, and I got these girls out. Now, what I do here, I don't think he fully expected. I moved Morgan Vahl up, and then I advanced these bottom Sacrosancts over here, getting 3 onto the point before I even charged, because I knew that these Chaos Spawn each only had 1 OC. So I've already flipped all 3 middle points, and we haven't even begun shooting. I had 2 miracle dice. I had, I think it was a 4 and a 5, I believe, or maybe a 3 and a 5, one of the two. I was at this point ready to use everything. So I had 3 CP. I had all my stuff. We had staged. We had kind of had that initial go. Now it's time to really, really set the pace. This is where I think a lot of armies struggle. They're a melee army, and as you notice, I have moved up and got in their face as much as possible with my shooting units, with my melee, everything I could. I got up there as much as humanly possible. Oh, I had spent 1 CP. I apologize, to give these guys the ability so they could advance and charge. But other than that, so I was down to 2. This is where it was. I'm going to give you a quick recap of what happened, and then we'll move on to turn 2 in the next video. So turn 1, what ends up happening is the emulator shoots into the Forge Fiend, and it ends up doing, it takes it down to about 7 damage. So at that point, I went, okay. I shot the Hunter Killer at the Rhino. It did from the Rhino. It did what hunter killers do, and it absolutely failed. So then I shot the hunter killer from the other immolator. Huzzah, it did 2 damage for me. At this point, I realized I needed to make sure I killed the Forgefiend. These Dominions did throw a grenade. The grenade did 3 damage, and then I fired all 5 Dominions into the Forgefiend to make sure I could get the kill. Now, I could have 100% split fired and still got it, but the whole goal of this immolator was to kill it. I had in my mind already allocated both these hunter killers, so they were going to fire up here, and I was going to fire this whole brick. And if that could take out the Forgefiend, great. If I had to use a grenade, in my mind, before I even deployed, when I saw this Forge up here, that was what I had allocated, and it worked. It died. That was a giant win. That's what I absolutely needed. Down here, the immolator shot into the Forgefiend. It did great. I used my 5 here on a miracle dice. And so when I got 1 wound through, I did my 5 to it, taking it down to 7. Now, this is where things got a little spicy. My Dominions split fire because one of them could absolutely shoot at this Forgefiend. The other 4 couldn't. But here's the thing. The other 4 could absolutely shoot at the Demon Prince. They were within his lone off. He wasn't expecting that. So what ended up happening was the one Dominion fired. She whiffed. Didn't do anything. That's okay. The other 3 Dominion, because the one had an Inferno pistol, she shot and killed 1 Gormonger. But the 3 that could do something fired into the Demon Prince. I did 8 damage to the Demon Prince. That was not at all what he was expecting, which did change my game plan, because the flamers were going to kill all these Gormongers once I out OC'd, and I was going to charge the chaos spawn. But when I saw how hurt he was, I said, okay, we're going to go full in all the way. At this point, I fired all of the Sanctifier's hand flamers into the Demon Prince, just feeding him a lot of saves. I did a damage. Sadly, I did not kill him, but I did get him down to 1 health. So at this point, I had also decided to myself that I was going to declare, a 4-inch charge. I had that 4 in my miracle dice pool, so I could use the 4, and then I only needed probably I needed a 2, so I could do a pivot here, and then I'd be able to make that charge. Because these guys were going to be a 7. So if I got 6, I'm in, obviously. I'd be within an inch. I'd actually be an inch and a half, but this was what I was thinking about over here. Here's what ended up happening next. And this is where that pressure can really, really set the tone. I went ahead and charged my Sacrosancts in. Spoiler alert, they killed every one of the Gormongers, and they were up in here, and they consolidated back, landed something to this extent. On the point, totally fine. I ended up rolling the charge on the Rhino. I did make it. He came in, he tank shocked, and when he tank shocked, he killed the Demon Prince. This was, at this point, backbreaking to my opponent, because he had lost a Forgefiend, he had lost his Gormongers, and he'd lost his Demon Prince. And if you notice, I'm in engagement in the clapback. He absolutely blew up my Rhino. I had gotten on this turn area denial and secure no man's land, so it was perfect. I wasn't concerned about that. But in full transparency, I didn't care what my cards were. When he moved up, I saw the opportunity to pick up north of 500 points, and I said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go in. So in the exchange, I lost 75. He lost 500 points because I was willing to get in his face and really punch. So drop a like for the Emperor and subscribe for more content like this. Part 2 will come out tomorrow about what happened on turn 2, because obviously he is about to crash into me and kill a ton of stuff. And we expected that. And the game really, really breaks open, and you'll see what happens in part 2. Thanks, y'all.